I'm Neil Cavido, glad to be here. Senator Scott in just a moment. First to Rich Edson at the State Department with the very latest. Rich.
Good afternoon, Neil. And the State Department's special representative for Venezuela, Elliot Abrams, says that the situation on the ground remains confused and that we have conflicting reports. This as, of course, the administration is hoping that this is the end of the Maduro regime at the beginning of it, where the military finally switches over, or much of it does, to push him from power to support then Juan Guaido. The National Security Advisor, John Bolton, just spoke at the White House and stressed the importance of this moment.
This has been building for a long time, that if this effort fails, they will sink into a dictatorship from which there are very few possible alternatives. It's a very delicate moment.
Maduro's foreign minister has been responding to U.S. government officials throughout the day to Bolton's declaration that Maduro's time is up. He says, "Dream on, Ambassador Bolton, not today." Abrams says there have been negotiations between Venezuelans both inside and outside of the Maduro regime, and the administration is hoping those inside the regime step up and move to support Juan Guaido. Abrams also says the administration did not expect these demonstrations today. Neil.
All right, Rich, thank you very much. My next guest says that, it could be time for U.S. military involvement in Venezuela. Florida Republican Senator Rick Scott. Senator, good to have you. Do you think that our presence there would make a difference?
Oh, absolutely. I was down the Venezuelan border last Wednesday. This is just pure genocide. Maduro is killing his own citizen. You can see it today, how many people have already been killed. You can see the genocide going on through starvation. I met moms living on the street that had to walk hours to get food in Colombia, with school children coming, walking hours to go to school each day. So it's just pure genocide. I think clearly we've got to look at our military going and taking humanitarian in there to stop the death just through starvation. I'm hopeful that we'll have a change in leadership today. Juan Guaido will be recognized inside Venezuela as the leader, like he is worldwide right now. I hope Russia and China understand they are supporting a murderer, a thug, somebody that's committing genocide against poor little children. That's exactly when President Putin and President Xi, what they're doing right now is they're supporting somebody that is killing little children. It's disgusting what they're doing. So we've got to step up. We've got to do everything we can to stop this genocide.
Is it worth, though, however strongly you feel, sir, losing American men and women to do just that?
Neil, here's what's going to happen. We are in the process, if we don't win today, we were going to have Syria in this hemisphere. Russia's there, China's there, Hezbollah's there, Iran's there, Cuba's there. We'll have Syria in this hemisphere. So we can either make sure something happens now, or we can deal with this for decades to come. And Syria is not, look at how many people lost their lives in Syria, and look at how much unrest it created in that entire area. That's exactly what's going to happen in South and Central America.
All right. There are, I think, about 100 retired generals, colonels from Venezuela who are in Colombia right now. Do you think that those folks working with the Colombians might be a better strategy for us?
Well, I think I think everybody's got to work with us. It shouldn't just be the United States. Every democracy worldwide that understands that we've got to stop genocide needs to step up and be part of this. America shouldn't be have to do things by themselves. All of us should be working together. If we care about families, if we care about the human race, if we care about our fellow worldwide citizens, then we've got to step up and stop this genocide.
What if they don't step up? Would you be open, Senator, to have us step up alone?
I think that, look, the president did a good job in getting Juan Guaido recognized as the interim leader, and countries around the world stepped up. I think we need to use all of our resources to get all these countries to be supportive.
Now, Senator, one of the other ideas, short of American intervention, has been an amnesty, if you will, for generals who are part of this regime or sympathetic to this regime. They've benefited mightily from that relationship because while most of the population is starving and has no access to medical supplies, they certainly do, unlike even some of their lower-ranking soldiers. Would you be open, in order for them to turn on the regime that has taken very good care of them, to provide protections and assurances that they would not be punished if if they turn on Maduro?
We have a government in waiting with Juan Guaido. That's a decision for the National Assembly to make. That's an internal decision they should be making. They've got to figure out what's going to make sure that Maduro steps aside and we stop the genocide. That's a decision for Juan Guaido and his government.
All right. Have you talked to the president about this?
I've been talking to the president all along. I talked to Ambassador Bolton this morning. I talked to the ambassador last week when I was in Colombia at the border. I talked to the president this weekend. I've been doing everything I can to make sure everybody understands what has happened here. We've got genocide now. In the future, we're going to have Syria if we don't get this done.
And was he sympathetic, that is the president, to your arguments when we heard the ambassador talking about all options are on the table? Was it your understanding that that included American troops?
I think the president all along has understood that all options have to be on the table, and he's going to. I believe the president will do everything that is necessary to make sure Maduro steps aside. Senator,
thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
All right, to retired General Jack Kane on all of this. General, you know combat. You know, as a four-star general yourself, what it's like. Is this a struggle that warrants American intervention?
I don't think it warrants American intervention yet. And the president's policies of peaceful transition, there's still leverage here to achieve that. I mean, watching John Bolton, National Security Advisor today, I know him well, as we all do here at Fox. I mean, he was frustrated and disappointed. It was stunning in his revelation, and the fact that he was talking publicly to high government Venezuelan officials who, after weeks and months of coordination, had determined that on this day, they were going to step up and turn against the Maduro regime. None other than the defense minister, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and the guy in charge of the regime guard force. All of them were going to step up today, and for some reason they did not do that. And
why do you think that is?
Well, you heard Ambassador Bolton say it's likely out of fear that they did not, or they are fundamentally prohibited from doing it. Now, why would they be prohibited? Let me tell you a couple of facts. Fact one, in January of this year, Putin deployed 400 members of a private military firm called the Wagner Group, same organization that we killed 200 of in Syria, and they have been involved in Crimea and also in eastern Ukraine. For what purpose? To provide personal security to Maduro. Last month, 100 of his advisors, now these are officers and technicians, came into Venezuela. For what purpose? To provide advice for the security of the regime. That means Putin has a direct link into what is happening every single day in Venezuela, and likely pulling leverages himself. And of course, we all know there are 20 to 25,000 Cuban goons here who are the paramilitary force that are opposing the people, not the military. I think we got to let this play out. I think the administration clearly doesn't know all the facts in a volatile situation like this. But clearly also, Neil, the strategic stakes are high here. We have made a decision to push back on the authoritarian communist regimes of Venezuela, socialist regime, Nicaragua, communist, Cuba, communist. Change the strategic framework. Russia, China, and Iran are supporting them. Russia has intervened to prop up the Maduro regime, similar to the way they did to prop up the Assad regime. If this regime does not fall, Russia comes out with leverage, and the fact is the United States' influence in the region would likely be diminished, as it was in Syria when we didn't take the proper action to do something about the regime there. But we have more time here before we rush in with military force. And those who want to use military force, you have to remember one thing. It never usually ends the way it starts. There's some rare exceptions to that. And these things have a tendency to seek its own level. So we have to act in concert with our allies in the region and where they are in all of this, and I'm confident the administration is talking to them.
Do you ever get the feeling, though, General, that they've laid a trap, that is, the Maduro government laid a trap, let them think that there's going to be this sort of mass surrender on the part of generals to switch over to the Guaido camp? when in fact they were laying a trap to maybe seize the protesters, seize Guaido himself, and perform their own permanent takeover to this solution.
You should be in government, Neil.
I'm very cynical. That's a very cynical view, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a possibility. I don't think so, because the people doing the coordination, this took weeks and months to get these three top officials to the position that they're at and provide them some assurances. I don't think that kind of conspiracy was operating.
But we've given all these assurances, right, as well as safe passage out of the country for Maduro. I think one of the countries mentioned was the Philippines, maybe another similar climate environment to his generals, mass amnesty to all of them, whatever monies they've stolen or taken advantage of the people. None of that seemed to work. So we're past that stage, I would guess.
Well, and the reason for that is that, one, they're all making a lot of money,
right,
and they're financially probably independently wealthy. They want to be able to get out with all of that if they do. They don't like the alternative, and they see in front of them still some daylight in terms of their ability to stay in power.
Right.
You know, much as we've seen others do the same thing. In Iran, certainly, in Syria, obviously. But the fact is, there's a lot of pressure here, and it's going to play itself out. One day of protest usually doesn't create a regime change.
Right.
Although I will admit, with those three officials, that they had turned against the regime, it probably would have been a catalyst to move on, to Maduro to move on.
Yeah, and that catalyst does not seem in evidence right now. Thank you, my friend, very, very much. The general on these developments. Real quickly, what's at heart here is the generals and the high-ranking military leaders are so far with Maduro. Lower-ranking soldiers who don't have the same access to the food and some of the other benefits that these generals enjoy. They have sworn that they would not shoot protesters or shoot their own people. The generals have not made such a commitment. Be that as it may, this is a test of wills here on the part of the military itself, divided among the top ranks, still loyal, maybe out of fear, maybe out of a host of other monetary reasons, to stay with Maduro, and the lower-ranking soldiers who are saying, we are sick of this. We shall see. If this was rattling the markets, it had a funny way of showing it in Latin America, and an even funnier way of showing it at the corner of Wall and Broad, that capped another good month for the major markets. The Dow finishing higher today,